Good old days. Autumn rain, autumn wind, they make one die of sorrow. Hyujin. In every age and part of the world, we hear these doleful jeremiads. Life was simpler and great in those days. For harkbackers to joyously appreciate the geometric functions used to evaluate man, bird, and beast, the narratives of the past have to enrich the current junctures of humanity's plot development. The antiquity accounts are brilliant minds' expressions on subjects of the deepest moment, full of vehement misapprehensions. Oratorical pageantry may be trapped in historians' ears and jotted down on a wall with an injection of wanting. For religious institutions and monarchs, the mass printing, their critical treatment of testimonies, and the ways and means of ferreting out phonies are the human race's original sins. I rolled the history dice 11 times, and nature plugged in humor. Mother Nature kneeled on one knee, and Europe uninterruptedly came face up each time. It could be the result of cosmic interference in my thought process, or the cauldron of repressed anger spilling over. The panorama of humans' chronicles makes Europe a glaring starting point for exposing centric biases. Europeans embellished folklore, and folkways are nowadays envied and venerated by the whole world. There was a time when this large area of land between Asia and the Atlantic Ocean's quirks were part savage and part doltish. Live subjects were dismembered to investigate human body function. Malodor was believed to cause chlamydia. Quacks gained opulence and favors by alleging to have a tacit understanding and a mastery of supernatural phenomenon. European men had magic spells down pat to induce prurient thoughts in their prospective mates. A man abducted, defiled, and molested whom he surmised to be the light of his life, until she gave credence to his phantasm and conceded to become his. This was the conventional means of tying the knot. A mother's previous mates were believed to pass on their features to her children by means other than insemination. Ignoramuses were immaculate creatures. Fortune-telling by facial deformities was considered an exact science. Inhumanness was a magnanimous gesture and a superlative. Citizens accused migrants of bringing in disease and crime. The public spectacle of tearing a human being from limb was a sour, sweet delight. In all fairness, the period of time when an empire or civilization ascendancy was at its height, its mores sunk to the lowest point of degradation, is a habitual coincidence. Every civilization has its peculiar moral decay. Mesopotamian brides were ordered to have sex with random strangers before their husbands touched the goods. There were no exceptions on the iniquity that Egyptians, Aztecs, and the Zhao practiced upon the poor and the defeated. In Zhonggao, heinous torture recipes were celebrated, and killing the chickens to shock the monkey was a common tactic. Persians went as far as to castrate their enemies' sons, while the Iroquois simply erased the neutral confederacy from existence. Every public festivity of fierce battle triumph archetypally included the mass raping of vanquished wives and daughters. The Maori had a different approach. They caged the conquered women and children at the beach to die in great pain and ate the men. Few moral turpitudes transcended with the same pretext and perversity as the oldest social arrangement and asymmetrical division of labor, slavery. To a large extent, slavery was woven into the fabric of empire's wealth and society's psychosis alike. Humans captured others for every deplorable reason one can imagine: atrocious extravaganza, forced labor, or commodities. The Vikings cruised off the English coasts for easy pickings. The Oyo kingdom refined cavalry assault to capture slaves swiftly and well. Everywhere under the sun, the children of slaves were to become nothing more than slaves. For the most part, slaves were domestic servants. However, communities did not sharpen their hunting human skills solely to make their lives easier. Some abductees met a brutal end to indulge bloodthirsty gods. Diabolically, every nation demonstrated an awareness of investment ricocheting on productivity and increasing employment. Confucius fought vehemently to preserve the Chinese slavery institution as it was dwindling away. Slavery was not color shade based until late in the game. African villains like King Diogo, Nkumbi, Amapudi unbolted the spirit of the Africanization of slave trades. The Sultanate of Oman played an essential part of blackening this sinister trade. Their acts ultimately led to the extinction of the notion that blacks were humans. The conquistadors' appetite and passion for slave trading was a beast of another kind. To evade bias, succinctness, and to increase comprehension, I shall say that many Spaniard sages objected to the use of the disingenuous terminology, trade. Nonetheless, they felt no compunction when Europeans purchased Africans, caged and sold by other Africans, or a child, hawked by its parents. The sheer variation of lunacy in history indicates the universality of the moron outbreak and its spread. In every corner of the world, intimidators and sociopaths were vividly admired. Given the opportunity to decide who shall dictate social order, old societies invariably chose absolute psychopaths. Masochism's appeal made the most merciless creatures into rulers, sages, and prophets. Casting doubt on the awareness of enlightened philosophers, or highlighting the provincialism in their literary works, is not without plenty of merits. Kindness and remorse as a potentate's primary attributes were not part of a serious dialogue. There was no difference in inhumanness's standards around the world. Essayists related events in which they took part by embroidering the truth and coincidences. The oppressors and the oppressed saw classlessness as an absurd social ideal. If one country had more gold than another, it was inevitably better off, or got beat up and its gold sacked by a bully empire. The best route to national prosperity was accumulating slaves and gold and silver ingots. From this angle, all of our ancestors appear to be downright greedy and sadistic. I have received an order from my Lord to guide the people toward God, the Most High. Those who want to thread this path just have to follow me. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. Anicius Manlius Saverinus Boethius wondered, if there is a God, whence proceed so many evils? If there is no God, whence cometh any good? If gold is the root of all evil, is it the ideal pretext for an impecunious right to commit evil deeds? Theism should be compelled to have a great rational foundation of its sacred values than anything else. Poltroon, sanctimonious talk about becoming abruptly omniscient. Their logic for community's vital subjugation to an omnipotent creature was mired in tomfoolery from its inception. Mortals were not cognizant that prudence was not a subject of convoluted competence which required it to be exhibited in the subtlety of matters. Warmongering empires and brutal groups pummeled and enslaved communities accused of being morally degenerated. This view was more than a belief. It was a mandate from heaven. If you committed atrocities in order to win a battle, then God must be on your side, and he wanted it that way. A perfect victor's logic. Sermons driven in fiery sleet words and images enchanted all who heard it. The flaming life of the moment and the extempore discourses orated during a deluge or abnormal disaster was echoed by priests and charlatans using the same dramatic tone to hypnotize the naive Pax. The voice of doom's potency was in words of good and evil chemistry. Typical theology's points of departure marked new divine front lines and reshuffled the characterization of saints and fools. Within a religious parcel, ideological purity was at all times at the center of its effort. The Mass was told where wise loyalty should lie. Holy orders went beyond rechristening the contending parties. You were denounced as an atheist if you expressed a reservation about the credibility of old scriptures. It was impossible to escape senile religious dogmas which led one to magnify the merits of deities. Plausible reasons justified theology's powerful influence over dialectical ingenuity. The science of medicine would be useless among people free from disease. Religion, like a satire, was fed by inflating the natural flaws and misfortunes of society. Long periods of prosperity were its whirlwind. When society was in upheaval, it shone forth with supreme splendor. The desperation for escaping from real time and space, the threat of apocalyptic fury, and fear of the ambiguous, paranormal, smothered native wit. In a Shangri-La free from crimes, commotions, and disturbances, there was still prophets and divinities. Theism encompassed the realm of space and the horizon of learning. The development of towns and the expansion of commerce disrupted seductive paganism. Verdicts on the non-physical mechanic of humans' existence asserted the primacy of their idiosyncratic interpretation of a maker or makers and paranormal signals. There was no moderation in religion's raison d'etre and preposterous proclamations. Words were blameworthy as a medium to transmit the God-mandated bloodbaths. Commitment to the insane and cynical explanation of the God's hints demanded outright self-deception or a lack of humor. Mockery of their harebrained guidebooks or dissent was not tolerated. Spiritual cartels hypnotized peasants at will and replaced obstreperous rulers with blue-blooded, acquiescent lackeys. Theology saturated the atmosphere of the old days. Humankind accepted forgeries and legends with childlike faith. The search for natural causation was impertinent. Sterile criticism of historical works had the same amateurism as medical practices. Religious factions did at times incorporate anodyne stances favorable to a balanced view of controversial questions. For the most part, only those who attain the stipulated degree of purity would be spared of afterlife torment, was their driving theological imperative. An equally unmeasured claim of "God is on my side" aided and abetted brutes in their rationalization for demeaning their enemies through decapitation, disembowelment, incineration, and other inhuman ways. Just as with any dominant segment of the ancient way of life, religious institutions relied on violence and coercion for its existence. History is a melodrama on the theme of parasitism, characterized by scenes that are exciting or dull, as the case may be, and many a sudden stage trick. Max Simon Nordau. Portraiture, or a Vedic chant trap, is a posture, a voice, and gesticulations that may be lost forever if the expression of intent is not well looked after. The strain of hominids' apathy dwarfs coherent anxiety. Waking up with a mouthful of tiny fingers, we worry more about our demise than the pain we inflict. A science which can achieve its appropriate function is well deserving of being written off as a pseudoscience. The unpalatable truth was the lack of a litmus test specific to social and political answers and ripostes exacerbating the world. Humankind's appetite for agonizing others and the disjointing pure act of altruism is as old as life itself. Weakling scholars found happiness in their orthodox cerebral routines and themes. Early idealists sought to wipe out a principle of imperfection that was thought to be human nature. Audacious study stimulated the character and fortunes of nations and was aimed at derailing acedia. Barthélemy de Laffemas' treatises urging the prosperous French to care for the poor have survived harsh censors and denunciations. Around the same epoch, the philosophical dimensions of social and political reform ideas were also sought after elsewhere. Shayahu Usman Dan Fodio's bold condemnations of peasants' treatments by abominable rulers altered a subcontinent. In summoning the rich conscience or killing despots, they reeled naive souls into great fables. Conflicts between and within métiers are also as old as life itself. While all the world was changing around the 18th century, the brawl of manufactured zealots and agriculture's aficionados was over Europe's mighty rulers' positive discrimination and philosophical commitment. In the midst of the raging philosophical battle, moral sentiments of exercising justice were no more or less neglected. Until the doctrine of science was enunciated, no fair verdict was possible. To Adam Smith, the political economy is a device for politicians to take care of the public or to assist individuals in enriching themselves. Stuart Mill later appended the proposition. The blunt truth shook Western congregations of the time. Their works remain inexhaustible storehouse of learning. Children emulate their older siblings. What on earth induced political economy sprouts, economists, to act as if their predecessors were disoriented by their extrasensory awareness of their period and milieu? Nothing happens all at once. What seemed natural and exciting gradually trapped avaricious creatures. The political economy started to witness an outburst of skepticism. They broke rank from the standing army of naive sympathizers who applauded the other cannon and schools of reflective efforts to legislate against political and ethical regression, despite paying a hefty price for their interact and parochialism. Newcomers resisting compassion in their philosophic bricolage was, for moneyers, an act of bravery. A potent argument is that the pure treason prolonged the despair of the poor. For the initial batch of economists, the quest for notoriety and respect did not consist of mere polished eloquence. They were more thrilled than obliged to deface political economists' gallant pleas and the humanistic impulse in order to enlist in hoodlums' crusades. The appeal of crossing to the wild analytical side was the desire to espouse the genuineness into what Thomas Carlyle and John Ruskin decried as a dismal science, or, as they bluntly state it, a gay science. The hype or illusion of scarcity was the currency abused by rogue political economy philosophers. It was believed that talented beings were rare. Therefore, humans could not be equal. The truth was as simple as that. For the sake of humankind, exceptional and resilient men, the few, had to reign over the immature and pathetic mass permanently. Teams of sages bluntly affirmed that the soul should not synchronize the cadence of what commodities were worth by quibbling. Such should be the responsibility of captains of industry. Cynical and degrading in public, the idea was stigmatized as false. However, in private it was another story. Even though they did not get accolades or great reviews for spraying human waste on a canvas, they got uncanny adherence. The total retreat of consciousness haggled down hominids' worth to stockpiles of muscles and mouths. Economics, or what was a commerce and trade subculture, flourished at the expense of the political economy by rejecting the relevance of the human soul. From that point on, in economics, the celebration of cerebral ejaculatio praeox became the fashion of the day. Manuscripts of early centuries embedded in oral traditions were hardly reliable. Did other societies at any time scrutinize humans' caprices while trading off their needs and wants? Communities' deficits and transcriptions or surviving texts is held by others as evidence of their inability to reason. Streaming comes from the Western Hemisphere, manufacturing roar, and demanding from newcomers the loyalty towards the non-figurative to get a grip on the phenomena unleashed by the complexity of social actions filled with new art, economy, and cold-hearted bastards. Economists were more enthusiastic in their abominable principles than the political economists in the virtuous desires. When lumpen intellectuals gawped in the past with their gray lenses, they asserted seeing Adam Smith's invisible soft hand waving. It could well have been Bartholomew de Lathamus's middle finger. Culture begets progress, and without it cannot be required of people no moral conduct. José Vasconcelos Calderón. Evaluating if the world today is absurd or zanier than it has been is no easy task. The sadness of mortal sins continually overwhelms ordinary souls. The simple truth is that if one is curious about the past, a perfect place to begin is by looking at history. Collectors rarely applied this critical test to their material. Traditions must be vandalized. Ancient world lunacies should get brighter with every disquisition as the factors contributing to civilization's rise and fall. given the dialogic nature of human history, intertextuality is justified in passing judgment on the old days. The consistent disgust, anger, frustration, hatred, ambivalence, and apathy within humanity's relationships with the past have infused full-size deceits, circumventing facts, and the contingency of context. This convention makes the past emerge comelier and perkier. The impulse of embellishing the old ways has been uninterruptedly in fashion. At some point in moving along history, we might realize that we are harboring stomach-turning ideologies by declining to defy our nostalgia. Yes, Casanova was a rapist. We have come to witness a bold advance towards the philosophic interpretation of the life of humanity. There is dynamism and contemplation between the past and the present, rather than vague coincidences. Refining the appraisal of the past permits other tones to be heard. If severe poverty, pandemic diseases, wars, ignorance, and spiritual exploitation are all primary parameters of measuring human progress, have we made any? What is there in the present day which doesn't exhibit perceptible religion influence in us? Bards and griots have not found a place among the great historians of the world. Hawks and vicious madmen are still role models. Are we willing to step back and make the wrong thing right? Tuatha De Danann emerged from the gate to hell, taught Irish Druidism, and exited from the same earth orifice. Screwballs inundated social and political economy in callousness and morphed into invisible monsters living today in our tap water. Their allegedly fresh theories, like monotheism or division of labor, were reconditioned, long-standing concepts, or the public prejudices and sentiments of their epoch. These rip-offs survived because of either the human body's proclivity for invisible, automatic processing, or because there wasn't a fashionably novel defense for obscure social construct. These days, context and the collection of emotion, time and space have gotten a bad rap within academia. Political economist villains have constructed a magnificent bridge from the old prejudices to the new, which is still the highway of discourses, and stands erect long after every other idiotic tenet of the times have fallen into ruins. The law of the invisible shapes our fatuous optimism. Mercantilism is the whipping boy in the history of economics. Of the originator's intent or public prejudice of the epoch, the caput mortuum is what cunning economists display. It is not that the aroma and filthy essences have vanished, but that we have become anosmatic. We all know stories of somebody who did not want to lie and was thrown in the furnace. The act of generosity comes after preventable horrors. Tears come down pale faces as the admiration of dead tyrants. The colonization bond between the oppressed and the oppressors pales in comparison to today's fiendish symbiosis between the abused and the abusers because of the melanin parity between the victims and the villains. The few who are gasping for freedom in shitty countries educe colonization proudly, with longing. Up to the present millennium, Zhongguo is a nation geographically disoriented and can't figure how to get over the hump of being more than almost the supreme country on earth. Folks from shitty nations sing the Mohi tune of seeking visas to the West to improve their fellow countrymen when they merely want to live in a European society. the middle class liberates itself while it continues to gyrate to racist, misogynistic, and xenophobic cadence. The control by adult males of an excessively large shares of power is still a self-evident truth. What is the punishment of old white males misappropriating the work of their students, who are discriminated against? Nobel Prizes. As we conclude this chapter, a sad thought presses itself upon our minds, that our thirst for non-perishable evil acts is unquenchable. By its very nature, humanity's susceptibility to compassion, acquired from miserable stretches, is repetitively and harshly smashed. No one dares to betray the joints or reveal patches, because this will destroy the charm of innocence. We have not started to extol new heroes for new virtues. Spirituality stresses a rigid adherence to the shocking details that mock life. The public scoffs at scoundrels' ghoulish records and gushes over fickle deities who have long thrown in the towel and gone back to hell. The consolidation of gods surely reminisces of a time when the earth was not meandered by humans. The good old days.